The voicemail was still playing when my mother-in-law walked into my home studio and unplugged my microphone mid-recording. Not mid-sentence. Mid-recording. 47 minutes of audio gone. "You're not a real podcaster," she said, setting the plug on my desk like she was returning borrowed scissors. "You play pretend on that thing while my son pays your bills. Dinner's not going to make itself." I sat there for 3 full seconds, staring at the cord dangling from her hand. 3 seconds where I could have said something measured and calm. 3 seconds where I could have been the bigger person my husband was always asking me to be. I didn't use those 3 seconds wisely. My name is Audra. I'm 31 years old. I have a podcast that 312,000 people subscribe to. I have a sponsorship deal with a skincare brand, a booking agent, and a business account that my mother-in-law did not know existed because my husband Barrett thought it was better if she didn't. That was his first mistake. Keeping secrets from her never worked. She had a way of finding edges and pulling until everything unraveled. I'd known who she was from the beginning. His mother, Vera, though everyone in his family called her by her initials VJ, was the kind of woman who made you feel like a guest in your own kitchen. She had opinions about dish soap brands. She had opinions about the thread count of our sheets. She arrived for what was supposed to be a 2-week visit after Barrett's father passed, 14 months ago, and the 2 weeks became a month, and the month became a season. And somewhere between Thanksgiving and Easter, I stopped thinking of the guest room as a guest room. Barrett and I had been married for 4 years. We met at a work conference in Austin, moved in together after 7 months, and got married in a small ceremony in the Smokies with 20 people and no photographer because we agreed the memory mattered more than the documentation. His mother did not attend. She said the drive was too far. It was 6 hours. She drives that same stretch every winter to see her sister in Knoxville. I noticed things like that early on. I filed them away. When VJ moved in after the funeral, I understood. Grief makes people need proximity. Barrett was her only child. I wasn't heartless. I set up the guest room with a good mattress topper and fresh towels, and I made a point of including her in dinners, in conversations, in the rhythm of our days. She interpreted this as an invitation to take over the rhythm entirely. She reorganized my pantry without asking. She started doing our laundry, which sounds generous until you realize she accidentally shrank 2 of my recording sweaters and replaced them with blouses she bought at a church resale shop. She would sit in the living room while I recorded and run the dishwasher at full volume, then look genuinely confused when I came out tense. "I didn't realize that little room was so sensitive," she'd say. Barrett's response every time: "She's just trying to help. She doesn't understand your work." So I explained it to her. Twice, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open and showed her the numbers, the downloads, the ad revenue, the deals. She listened with her hands folded in her lap and her head tilted slightly, the way you'd listen to a child explain a dream. "That's very sweet," she said when I finished, "but Barrett has a real salary, benefits, a 401(a). What happens if the internet just stops?" I let it go. You learn which battles to forfeit. What I didn't forfeit was my work. I recorded 6 days a week, edited late into the evenings, responded to every email, prepared every segment myself. My podcast, it covered true crime adjacent to financial fraud, the kind of cases where someone ordinary gets destroyed by someone they trusted, had built a following that surprised even me. I'd started it 3 years ago on a USB mic in our old apartment, talking into the dark at midnight because Barrett worked early shifts and I didn't want to wake him. Now I had a proper setup. A treated room, a condenser mic, a mixer board, headphones that cost more than my first laptop. I had a producer in Portland I'd never met in person but spoke to every Thursday. I had a deal that was, at the time VJ yanked my cord, 2 days away from being finalized. A major true crime network had approached me about a licensing agreement, exclusive distribution, a guaranteed advance, revenue share. My lawyer had been reviewing the contract for 3 weeks. I had not told Barrett about the deal yet. Not because I was hiding it. Because the last time I'd shared a professional milestone, a magazine feature, nothing huge. He'd mentioned it to his mother over Sunday dinner, and she'd spent the rest of the meal asking whether the magazine was legitimate and whether I'd been careful about what I shared online. I was protecting my own good news. That's where we were. So when VJ pulled that plug, she didn't just erase 47 minutes of audio. She interrupted the final episode I was recording before the contract announcement, the one my producer was waiting on. the one that was supposed to go out that Friday to set up the announcement on Monday. I looked at the cord in her hand and I said very quietly, "Please put that back, dinner," she said again like I hadn't spoken. "I will make dinner in 40 minutes when I finish recording. Please put that back." She set it on the desk with a small click. "I don't understand why you need a whole room for a hobby." Something cracked loose in my chest. Not anger. I know what anger feels like. This was something older and quieter and much more final. "It's not a hobby," I said. "It's my business. And you just cost me 3 hours of work." She made a sound. A kind of gentle scoff, almost affectionate, like I'd said something endearingly misguided. "Audra, sweetheart, Barrett pays the mortgage. He pays half the mortgage," I said. "My name is on the deed too," she blinked. "And if you ever touch my equipment again," I continued, "you will need to find somewhere else to stay." I turned back to my chair. I was shaking, but my voice had been steady, and that was what mattered. VJ left the room. I heard her in the kitchen, opening cabinets harder than necessary. I sat in front of my mic for a while without pressing record. Then I pressed record. I restarted from the top. I recorded 3 hours of clean audio. I did not make dinner. Barrett came home at 6:15. I heard them talking in the kitchen before I came out. I couldn't hear exact words, but I heard the rhythm, her low and urgent, him quiet and careful. I recognized that pattern. It was the pattern of her downloading a grievance, and him figuring out how to package it for me without making me feel ambushed. I came out before he finished packaging it. He was at the stove, stirring something VJ had started. She was at the kitchen island with a glass of wine, watching him cook the way a director watches a rehearsal. "Hey," Barrett said. He glanced at me quickly. "Mom said you two had a rough afternoon." "She unplugged my microphone in the middle of a recording session," I said. "I was trying to get her attention," VJ said pleasantly. "She had headphones in. What was I supposed to do, Wave?" "Knock," I said. "On the door. That I keep closed specifically so you know I'm recording." Barrett set down the spoon. "Can we just let's eat together? We can talk after." "There's nothing to talk about," I said. "I told her if she touches my equipment again she'll need to find somewhere else to stay." That's where we landed. The kitchen went quiet. VJ set her wine glass down very gently. "Barrett," she said. He looked at her, then at me, then somewhere at the middle distance between us. "Audra," he said slowly. "That's I'm gonna finish my edit," I said. "Let me know when dinner's ready." I went back to my room. I was not invited to let him know when dinner was ready. It was ready at 7:10. I came out and we ate, and VJ talked about her friend from church whose daughter had just had a baby, and Barrett asked questions about the baby, and I ate my food and nobody looked directly at me. After dinner, Barrett came to find me. He sat on the edge of the bed while I was at my desk reviewing edits. I didn't turn around. "She feels like you're trying to push her out," he said. "I am," I said. "Not out of our lives. Out of my workspace. Those are different things, Audra." "She destroyed an afternoon of work, Barrett. Not the first time. The third." He was quiet. "You knew about the dishwasher thing," I said. "And the sweaters. You said you'd talk to her." "I did talk to her." "Okay," I turned around. "What did you say?" He didn't answer right away, which was its own answer. I turned back to my screen. "I'm going to need her to leave by the end of the month," I said. "I'll help her find a short-term rental. I'll pay the first month if that helps the conversation go easier, but she can't stay here indefinitely. She's grieving. It's been 14 months. There's no timeline for grief. There is a timeline for how long someone can live in my home and treat me like staff," I said. "That timeline has ended." Barrett left the room without a response. I heard him downstairs for another hour. Then I heard him come up, get ready for bed, slide in next to me without saying anything. He was asleep before I was. I lay there thinking about the contract, about the advance, about the fact that I hadn't told him and now I was glad I hadn't, and what that gladness said about us. 2 days later, my producer Declan sent me a message at 8 in the morning. "The network wants to move up the signing. Can you do a video call at 2? I was in the kitchen when I got it. VJ was at the island with her coffee reading something on her phone. Barrett had already left for work. I went back upstairs to my studio. I set up my desk, tested the mic, opened my notes. At 1:50 I went downstairs to make tea before the call. VJ was still at the island. "Big afternoon?" she asked, not unkindly. She had moods, and this was a mild one. "Work call," I said. "Is it the thing you've been nervous about?" She tilted her head. "Barrett mentioned you had something coming up." I set the kettle down carefully. "He mentioned it? He said you'd been distracted lately, stressed. She folded her hands. I know I haven't been easy, Audra. I know that. She said it the way people say things when they want you to disagree with them. But I want you to know I respect that you work hard. I just worry that you're building something on a foundation that could disappear tomorrow. The internet it's not a real industry. I looked at her for a long moment. I have to take this call, I said. Of course. She picked up her coffee. I hope it goes well. It went better than well. 40 minutes later, I had a verbal agreement pending final paperwork on a deal that would pay me more in the next 18 months than Barrett made in 3 years. The network wanted a Q&A episode. They wanted my origin story. They were talking about a live event series. Declan was so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. After I hung up, I sat very still in my chair. I had a moment that I don't know how to describe exactly. The feeling of something you built alone, quietly, in the dark, suddenly being lit up in a room full of people. I wanted to call Barrett. I picked up my phone, put it down. Because here's what I knew about Barrett. He would be happy. He would genuinely be happy. He would hug me and say he was proud of me, and mean it. And then that evening, at dinner, he would tell his mother. Because he couldn't help it, the way some people can't help sharing things. It wasn't malice, it was just how he was wired. He'd say it like good news. Like something to celebrate over the table. And she would find a way to sand it down until it was small again. I wasn't willing to let her touch this one. So I called my sister instead. My sister screamed so loud that VJ probably heard it downstairs. Then I opened my laptop and sent the contract to my attorney. That night at dinner, I said nothing about the call. Barrett talked about a project at work. VJ talked about calling a plumber for a slow drain in the guest bathroom. I said I'd handle it. 3 days later, the paperwork came through. I signed it alone at my kitchen desk at 9 in the morning while VJ was on her walk and Barrett was at the office. My attorney countersigned. Declan sent champagne emojis. I took a shower, I put on real clothes, and then I sat down and thought about what came next. What came next started with the mail. Barrett had a habit of leaving mail on the kitchen counter, his mail, my mail, mixed. I'd asked him to sort it a dozen times. He never really did. So when VJ decided to be helpful one afternoon and organize the counter, she went through the stack. She wasn't looking for anything. I believe that. She found something anyway. A piece of the contract documentation, preliminary, not sensitive, but still letterheaded. A forwarded addendum from my attorney's office. She would have seen the company name, the dollar figures referenced in the terms. I came downstairs at noon to find her sitting very still at the island, not on her phone, not with coffee, just sitting. Who are you working with? She asked. I looked at the papers on the counter. I looked at her. Did you go through my mail? It was in the pile. She wasn't defensive, she was something else, recalibrating, Audra. That number. I picked up the papers and held them against my chest. Does Barrett know? She asked. Not yet, I said. Something moved across her face. Why not? Because I wasn't ready to share it. With your own husband. With anyone, I said, including you. She stood up slowly. When she spoke, her voice had that particular texture, controlled but barely. I've been in this house for over a year. I've been trying to. I thought we were family. And you've been hiding money from my son. I haven't hidden anything, I said. I built something. I wasn't ready to announce it. Those are different things. He has a right to know what his wife is earning. The word right hit something. Not with heat, with clarity. He has a right to know, I agreed. He doesn't have a right to know on your timeline, or yours. She pulled out her phone. I'm going to call him. That's your choice, I said. I set the papers down, opened my laptop. I'm going to work, she called him. I heard her in the living room, voice low, controlled. But I've lived in this house long enough to know the cadence of that conversation. The quiet alarm she was building word by word. Not lying exactly, just framing. Audra has been keeping a significant business arrangement secret. I think you should know the kind of money we're talking about. I'm worried about what this means for your partnership. Partnership. Like we were a small business with shared books and quarterly reviews. Barrett came home early. I heard his car in the driveway at 2:40. I was at my desk. I didn't move. He came upstairs and stood in the doorway of my studio. Why didn't you tell me? He asked. I swiveled my chair. I was going to tell you this weekend. The ink dried 3 days ago. My mother said, I know what your mother said. I kept my voice even. What do you think? He leaned against the doorframe. He was in his work clothes. A light blue button-down, slightly rumpled. He looked tired. He always looked tired lately, and I'd stopped asking him why because the answer was always something vague about the commute. I think, he said slowly, that we're supposed to tell each other things. We are, I said. And I was going to. I wanted to wait until it was real. Until the papers were signed and the money was confirmed. I didn't want to celebrate early and then have it fall through. You called your sister. I blinked. I did, but not me. I sat with that for a moment. Barrett, I said. The last time I told you good news, your mother had an opinion about it before the dinner dishes were cleared. I needed a few days to hold this myself before she got to it. He went quiet. That's not a marriage problem, I said. That's a household problem. And I've been asking you to fix the household problem for 14 months. The conversation that followed was the longest we'd had in a year. He didn't shout. Neither did I. He said things like she's my mother, and she's been through so much, and I said things like I understand that, and I have also been through things, specifically the last 14 months of living in a house where I feel like a guest. At some point, VJ appeared in the hallway outside the door, not in the room, just present, listening. I looked past Barrett at her. I think, I said clearly, that it would be better if you found your own space, not because I don't care about you, but because this hasn't been working. For any of us. She looked at Barrett. He didn't move to her. That was the first time I'd seen that. In 14 months of conversations and dinners and sighs and compromises, I had never seen him fail to move toward her when she looked at him that way. He just stood there, tired. Still. Mom, he said, can you give us a minute? She went downstairs. I heard the ice maker, then nothing. Barrett sat down on the chair by the window, the one I'd been meaning to reupholster for 2 years. He put his hands on his knees. He looked like a man trying to do math in his head that he already knew the answer to. I should have asked her to leave sooner, he said. I didn't say yes, you should have. I said, it's not too late to do it now. She doesn't have anywhere to go. She has her sister in Knoxville, I said, and I will pay her first month's rent somewhere within 30 miles of us so she's not far. That offer stands. But she can't stay in this house. He nodded. It took a while, but he nodded. What happened over the next 10 days wasn't dramatic. It was quiet and logistical, which is sometimes harder. Barrett had the conversation with his mother. She did not take it well. She cried. She said things she shouldn't have said. She told him he was choosing money over family and that I had changed him. He called me from the kitchen at 9:30 at night while she was upstairs packing. She says you've made me unrecognizable, he said. What do you think? I asked. I was in my studio. I had my headphones on, but they weren't plugged in. I think, he said, that I've been asking you to be patient for too long. She left on a Saturday. I helped carry boxes to her rental SUV. We didn't hug, but she took the casserole dish she'd left in our cabinet, and I handed it to her without comment. She looked at me in the driveway, really looked at me, and for a second I saw something in her face that wasn't anger. I think it was surprise, like she'd expected a different ending to this story. I hope the podcast does well, she said finally. Thank you, I said. She drove away. The house felt different that afternoon. Bigger, somehow, though nothing had changed structurally. I opened the windows in the kitchen. I made coffee the way I like it, strong, no sweetener, in the big mug Barrett's brother gave me for Christmas. I sat at the island for the first time in over a year without feeling like I was sitting in someone else's chair. Barrett and I had a long way to go. I knew that. The 14 months hadn't just been about his mother, they'd also been about his habit of managing peace instead of building it, about the gap between what he said to me privately and what he was willing to say out loud. Those things don't fix themselves when someone's car leaves the driveway. But we started. We started slowly and awkwardly, the way you start something real. He asked me about the podcast over dinner one night, actually asked, with questions, follow-up questions. I showed him the dashboard the way I'd shown VJ months ago, but it felt different this time. He said, I didn't realize. I believed him. I didn't tell him that part of what had made me successful was recording alone in the dark while the house was quiet. That the discipline and the privacy and the stubbornness of it, none of that had come from having a cheerleader. It had come from learning to take up space without permission. The first episode of my new distribution deal went live on a Thursday. Within 24 hours, it had more downloads than anything I'd released in the previous 6 months. The comments were full of people saying they'd found the show through the network and couldn't stop listening. Declan sent me a voice note that was mostly just noise, because he was apparently in a coffee shop. I was sitting in my studio when I read through the messages. My mic was on. The red light was glowing. I pressed record, not because I had something planned, because I finally had a room that was fully mine. No footsteps above me, no cabinets opening outside the door, no cord pulled from the wall by someone who thought silence was the same thing as waste. She thought what I did in here wasn't real work. I built an empire in the quiet she tried to take from me.